Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to be here with Naomi Lindenfeld presenting a perspectives conversation. This conversation is presented in conjunction with the exhibition that we have on view right now at Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center. It's an exhibition entitled Dialogue, and we're going to hear a little bit more about it today. Thank you so much for being here with me, Naomi. I want to just turn it over to you and start off with a question, super simple. We'd love if you could tell us a little bit about the genesis of this exhibition project and how you kind of got started making these works and just a little introduction to what we're going to be talking about today.
Thanks, Kira. Um, I'm so glad to have this opportunity to honor my mother, Lore Kadden Lindenfeld, who was a student at Black Mountain College. She was there from 1945 to 1948, and she actually is one of the few who graduated from there. I want to thank Jeff Arnold and Alice Sabrell for being receptive to having this exhibit at the Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center in celebration of my mother's profound experience as a student at Black Mountain College. The idea for the dialogue, Lindenfeld plus Lindenfeld, was conceived by Mara Williams, who was the chief curator at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center in Brattleboro, Vermont, where I've lived for the last 45 years. She was at my house one day and admired my mother's textile work. And along with being intrigued by her work, she was very interested in the fact that she had gone to Black Mountain College. And she asked if I had ever specifically made pieces inspired by her work. And I knew that I'd been strongly influenced by my mother's work, uh, but I had never actually set out to design my clay work and influenced by her work. Mara was putting together a series of dialogue shows at the museum and invited me to take on the challenge of engaging in a dialogue with my mother's fiber work. I worked on the project for about a year and a half, and that exhibit happened at the museum in Vermont in 2015. For the original body of work, I chose pieces of my mother's that I specifically responded to. With the added pieces for the current exhibit in Asheville, I chose pieces of hers and mine that I felt were strong works. Some had apparent connections, and others, the discovery of the connections were made when we laid out the work in the gallery of the museum to set up the show. I'd like to tell you a bit about my mother's background, and then I'll tell you some about my own, and then I'll discuss the process of creating and selecting the work for this exhibit.
That would be great if you want to just tell us a little bit about how your mother came to study at Black Mountain College and what she studied there, and how that kind of influenced you going forward.
So, my mother was born in 1921 in Wuppertal, Germany. After she finished high school, she studied in Dusseldorf. She went to an art school there, but then her family had to flee overnight from the Nazis. They went to Holland for a year because she had an uncle there. Her father, rather than continuing with her art education, insisted that she pursue a practical profession. So she got a job in Holland working at a clothing workshop where she learned to sew once and embroidery. She did embroidery there as well. Once they were able to come to the US, she was 18 and they settled in Boston. And she got seamstress jobs. And for a while, she was the sole financial support for her family. She then got a job at a place called the Window Shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was started by Harvard faculty wives to employ German and Austrian refugees. It was a gift shop and a cafe, and she worked as a sales clerk in the gift shop. And there's a book about the window shop, and this shows my mother on the cover of it. She found out about Black Mountain College while working there and got a scholarship to attend for what lasted a year. They actually were wanting to put their funds into a move, and so it just lasted a year. She was ready to pack up and leave after that year, but the mother of a former student, that student had actually been the one who interviewed her in Boston initially. Uh, she had met this student's mother at that time, and she found out that she would have to leave, that my mother would have to leave because the scholarship was coming to an end. That woman told her that she would pay the tuition for the rest of her education there. Really an incredible stroke of fate that we will forever be deeply moved by. At Black Mountain College, my mother was able to explore her creativity for the first time without the concerns of war and earning money. She took a variety of courses, but spent a majority of her time studying design, color theory, drawing, and painting with Josef Albers. She would walk through the weaving studio to get to those courses, and she had never woven before, but she was fascinated with the looms. And by her second year there, she started taking weaving classes with Ani Albers. Both Albers brought the Bauhaus influence of combining fine art and craft to their teaching. Ani's weavings exemplified the Bauhaus architecture influence modernist style. Ani shows the influence of the Bauhaus in also experimenting with unconventional materials. As a student, my mother made a piece using metal shavings that a boyfriend who worked in a pen factory had sent to her. This is actually an image of a piece that my mother did in Josef Albers' design class. It shows undulation and negative and positive spaces. And this is my mother's graduation piece. This piece is actually in the permanent collection of the Renwick Gallery, which is part of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. It demonstrates the complex weaving technique of double weave and layering of patterns. She became very interested in the mathematical aspect of weaving. I did not inherit that aptitude. Ani Albers' approach also encompasses weaving for industrial production, another indication of Bauhaus' attention to both form and function. When the Albers went to Mexico for a couple of years, my mother studied under Trudy Germonprez, who she was equally influenced by in the realm of design and artistic inspiration beyond the technical. After my mother graduated from Black Mountain, she came to New York City and got a job as a designer in the textile industry. She continued to do that work for 10 years, and during that time, she worked for garment companies. Her work was featured in Vogue, Mademoiselle, Harper's Bazaar, and American Fabrics magazines. Textile samples that she created then, as well as magazine advertisements like these two here, where the models are wearing clothes made from her textile designs, can be seen in the drawers of the display cases at the museum. My parents met in New York City at that time. My father was a graduate student at Columbia, and they met at the 8th Street Club, which is frequented by many people who were connected with Black Mountain College. And my father was brought there by a mutual friend, and on the evening that they met there was a John Cage happening. So, and my parents then moved to New Jersey, and my father started teaching physics at Rutgers University. Just before I was born, my mother gave up her industry job to raise me and my brother. This is a picture of me with my mother at her loom in our living room. She wove and created wall hangings. She started the weaving department at Middlesex County Community College in Edison, New Jersey. She also taught art history there. Black Mountain College was not an accredited college. So after some years of her teaching at Middlesex, in order to get a promotion, she actually went back to school to go to Rutgers, and at the age of 61 earned a master's degree in creative arts education. She taught at Middlesex for a total of 18 years, and then after that immersed herself more fully in her work that transitioned into fiber collages. My mother uh, experimented with tapestry weaving, followed by wanting to break out of the grid of the loom altogether. She then started working off the loom and created fiber collage pieces. So the one on the left is from the when she did the tapestry work, and that was actually a piece that was inspired by dancer Judith Jameson, who was part of the Alvin Ailey Company. And the piece on the right is one of her early fiber collage works. The base material for her collage pieces is a material called Pellon, which is an interfacing used for collars and stiffening when people do sewing. And it adds stability also for quilting. It's a pressed polyester fabric. So she starts with that, and then she layers different kinds of fabric and fibers, netting, rice papers, yarn, and then she stitches and draws with a felt tip pen on that. So I was exposed to many artists and craftspeople during my childhood, and took my first pottery class with a friend of my mother's who was a potter in her studio. And I responded to the immediacy of clay. I attended Boston University program in artisanry in the late 1970s. And while working on my degree in ceramics, I discovered the Japanese technique narikomi of layering colored clays to create patterns. And I've been captivated by many ways of working with colored clay since that time. After college, I worked for several potters, and soon after moving to Vermont, I co-founded a potters collective called the Brattleboro Clayworks. And I worked there for 21 years. And for the last 23 years, I've been working out of a home studio in West Brattleboro. My aim has been to combine usefulness and beauty in objects that are lived with on a daily basis. The technique that I've developed involves staining the porcelain clay, and I then layer it into a block, and then I take a slice from the block and roll it out, carve into it, which reveals layers, and then I roll or pinch the clay and shape it into the pieces, and then they're fired in a gas kiln. So 27 years ago, I became the part-time ceramics teacher at the Putney School, a boarding high school. I had not had aspirations to teach, but I must have inherited teaching genes from my parents, since I discovered that I love it, and I continue to be stimulated by it all these years later. The Putney School and Black Mountain College have deep connections in their progressive philosophies based on John Dewey's teachings, and both make art, have made art an important element to their education. It happens that I just retired from teaching at Putney this past December, and I'm now opening myself to new experiences, which include deepening my art practice and teaching workshops, which I've been doing for a number of years. There are connections between me and my mother's use of innovative methods and aesthetic sensibilities. The sense of movement, abstract graphic quality, nature imagery, and vivid color echo each other's work. It was fascinating and challenging to interpret two-dimensional pieces into three-dimensional realm, but this is an example of my newer two-dimensional tea journey art, where there's the added challenge of not just reproducing my mother's ideas and approaches, but to draw inspiration from her work and design the pieces as my own.
I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about these tea journey works that you've been working on recently and a little
Mm,
bit about the technique and process behind those.
mm. Yeah. So I started doing this 5 years ago, where I've been making art with tea bags. And what I do is I outline the tea stains after you drink the tea and you squeeze the tea bag and you let it dry. There are these kind of wave-like patterns that happen from the tea stains. And then after that, I paint on them. And then I've started to combine them with other materials. Uh, and in this piece here, there's newsprint and there's black paint and there's stripping away of the newsprint to reveal the lines around the where the tea bags are. And I've studied with a couple of mixed media artists and continue that with my explorations.
So I'd love if we could just dive into some of the
Mhm.
pairings that are in this exhibition, the pairings between your works and your mother's works, and just give us a little insight into those pairings.
Yeah. This Rhythm of Wood series of my mother's they were the first pieces that I worked with because the connection was so obvious to me. As long as I've been working with layered clay, I've seen wood grain patterns when I cut open the block horizontally, kind of undulating, and I get rings that look like wood grain. Uh, when I designed this vase, I got the wood grain look on the front and the back, and then carved the sides to get the appearance of bark. And when the piece was done, I realized that it looked like a piece of cordwood. And one of our sources of heat here is a wood stove. So this imagery comes from my everyday life. And for my mother, the patterns of wood were something that she particularly noticed when she went on some trips to Japan and also in Vermont, where uh, she, my parents went to from New Jersey. And included in this exhibit are some of her design studies for the Rhythm of Wood series. And what she would do is she would draw planks of wood with the grain patterns, and then she Xeroxed those drawings, and then she drew on them more to get a textural effect. And then she would cut up those pieces that were Xeroxed and reassemble them to work out her compositions. And there's one of those assemblages in the exhibit, and then there are others that are in the drawers of the display cases in the front of the museum. So the transparent forest fiber collage made by my mother was first made by sketching a photograph of the Vermont woods where my parents spent their summers since the early 1970s. She then drew with a felt tip pen, stitched and dyed areas. And I love how it invites you into the path through the trees and how the branches intertwine. I got the idea to make a series of vases with larger ones in the front and smaller ones in the back to give the illusion that you're walking into a path in the forest. I carved and rolled flat the branches, and then I carved them again to give them some added dimension. And I also used some yellow color in the ones in the front to have it look like the light is hitting in the front, and then they get darker as you go back. It's no longer a set of functional vases, it's rather an installation that creates a whole environment. The triptych book made by my mother titled Point Lobos is inspired by rock formations in California where she had been. I had essentially not delved into sculpture much before, but I took a professional level workshop where I learned a technique to build sculptural forms. The 5 pieces that I made suggest rocks with water flowing through them, and the texture is made from actually pressing rocks into the surface. And I used a different clay called the sculpture clay, and painted on layers of terra sigillata, which is actually a very fine version of a liquid clay with colorants in it. And then I wore down the surface with fine steel wool to achieve the weathered effect. When my father saw the tidal rocks piece that I had made, he said he had a fiber collage of my mother's from that series, and he thought it looked more much like my sculpture. So when I saw it, I agreed, and I really like that both of the pieces are in the exhibition. One is more abstract and one is more representational, and I feel like my piece is somewhere in between the two. And my mother taught me about suggesting familiar images in one's work without being too literal. My mother's piece titled Ceremonial is the one that Mara originally saw in our house that prompted her to ask questions and get excited about showing me and my mother's work at the Brattleboro Museum. It's a great example of the Bauhaus style, and it's also innovative with its use of twisted ribbons to create a texture and plastic raffia to give it a glimmer. My tapestry tray echoes the shape of the angled lines, and the weaving and the crossed carving that I did with the colored clay has the effect of being woven. The weaving of my mother's titled Reflection is another great example of the Bauhaus style. It has a simple but striking pattern of the offset triangles and beautiful vivid colors. I looked at it and I thought box because of the rectangular shape. I had a vision of making the triangles raised to act as a way of picking up the lid. My way of working, my approach to working is usually very organic, and I don't particularly enjoy anything that involves measuring or precision. So I thought of asking a friend, Stephen Lloyd, who's an architect and painter, to help me design templates to make the box from. And I thought it worked out beautifully. I don't think I would have been able to pull off having the pattern be the same proportions as the weaving and have all the lines all match up from the top, from the lid to the sides without his help. Again, I used sculpture clay and painted on the terra sigillata layers of it and rubbed it off. So this piece is titled Curves and Waves of My Mother's. And that led me in the direction of using blues and greens, which is what I associate with curves and waves. Bright yellow and red has not been part of my color palette. I wasn't that enamored with this weaving when my mother originally made it. I thought that the colors were garish and I didn't know why she was choosing to use plastic raffia. It turns out that it was both her rebellion against the movement of natural dyeing and natural fibers, and also her wanting to break out of the grid of the loom with creating waves and the curves. And she discovered that she could get plastic raffia from a hat maker in the garment district in New York City. And it was a byproduct of that industry. Again, the Bauhaus influence in Black Mountain College of using industrial and everyday materials.
Something that people have been mentioning when they come to see the exhibition that they find really inspiring is the large date range of these works. We have works on view that are from your mother's time at Black Mountain College in the
Mm,
1940s, and there are
mm,
also works that are, made as late as the 90s. And
mm.
so I'd love if you could speak a little bit to that and about your mother's, continued creative practice all throughout her life, which I find really inspiring.
Um, yeah, this exhibit really does show the whole breadth of her work from when she was a student all the way up to the end of her life. And she was remarkable in how she stayed active with it and kept growing with her work and changing styles. And um, and it seems like with that fiber collage work at the later period of her life, she really got very experimental, and certainly that was inspiration to me, um, that one can keep growing for your whole life. Um, So yeah, she did this piece here called Foliage, and she was inspired by a theme that was part of this group that she was involved with called the New Jersey Designer Craftsmen, and they would come up with a theme for exhibits. And this particular piece was made for one where they each chose a New Jersey poet. And there's actually the poem on the back of this piece by Paul Muldoon. And she would crinkle up rice paper and tissue paper and draw, and it's sort of an abstract rendition of Wind and Tree, which was the title of the poem. And for the piece that I created, I first of all did one of the largest pinch pieces that I had ever done. I would layer a block, and I'd usually get multiple pieces out of one block, but this was made out of a whole block of clay. And so technically I had to figure out how to do that. And I feel like I captured that sense of wild movement of what happens when the wind blows the leaves around in the tree. And then the starting point for Marshlands is also from that theme series where they were asked to pick a place. And it was actually, I think, specifically about this marsh in Trenton, New Jersey. And she had my father take a photograph of the marsh. And then that photograph was printed on the Pellon in their home printer. And then from there, she added netting and fibers and stitching. And so there's that really interesting combination of photograph and fiber overlaid on it. And for my piece, I also tried something I hadn't done before, which was adding clay to the surface of the layered and carved colored clay, and then carving into those yellow areas to achieve the look of the flowers. As my mother took those opportunities from those themes to grow creatively, I also discovered that having a starting point, such as her work, brought forth new ideas for me. And for each of the pieces that I made for the show, I tried something I hadn't done before. And my husband, Michael Bosworth, also got inspired by the clay and fiber pieces of the marshlands to write a poem. And it beautifully conveys the creative connection between me and my mother, and our ways of working and with our respective materials. And I'm very honored that Michael was moved to write this poem for the occasion of the exhibit. I'll finish by showing a pairing of another one of my favorite pieces of my mother's from her Forest Transformed series. And this one is a more abstract version from that series. And for my piece, I carefully arranged the outlined tea stains on the tea bags to give the illusion of tree bark. And the framing around the tea bags is layers of tissue paper and newsprint, and then I used polyurethane as a coating. And it did not occur to me until well into my experimenting with the tea journey pieces that I'm now doing, with the drawing and combining materials, how similar what I'm doing is with what my mother created with her drawing, stitching, and various fibers. And I've also been carrying on the lineage of making art with repurposed everyday materials. In the exhibit, there are also other incidental pairings of my mother's and my pieces. And through this project, I've gained a new and deeper appreciation of my mother's work. At the same time, I've taken my own work to a new level. And I want to end with um, the, my tea prayer flags. And in the exhibition, there are a couple of strands of the prayer flags. And with that, I will hope that they spread a sense of peace.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It was so wonderful to hear these insights and just to get a deep dive into these works. And I think that this exhibition is such a beautiful example of how the ideas and concepts and techniques that animated life at Black Mountain College are still so relevant and inspirational today for someone who has a really direct connection, like you, through your family, but also for all of us here and all of us experiencing these works for the first time. So thank you so much. For everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. This has been a perspectives conversation. You can find more information about Naomi's work as well as her mother and her time at Black Mountain College on our website. And stay tuned for more artist talks like these, where we're diving deep into the history of Black Mountain College and some of the really exciting things that are being created today in response to the legacy of Black Mountain College and everything that it meant to so many people. So thank you so much, Naomi.
Thank you so much.